Welcome to the Beyond Spread, the podcast where I reconnect with inspiring entrepreneurs I've had the privilege of working with. I'm your host, Carlos Jonas, and today I'm excited to welcome Olya Grovel, a marketing and growth expert with a decade of experience scaling tech startups. I first met Olya a year ago in the Founders Club by sort of Wise Guys, where she was building Aurora, an AI-powered coaching app designed to help founders and entrepreneurs discover their why. In this episode, we'll explore the evolution of Aurora, the realities of balancing a startup, motherhood, and a full-time job, and the lessons Olya has learned along the way. Let's jump in. Hi, Olya.
Hi, Carlos.
Great to have you on the podcast.
Great to be here. I'm glad we were connecting. I'm super excited.
Let's dive right in, and maybe you could start by briefly introducing yourself to the listeners.
Sure. All in all, I have about a little over a decade of experience in marketing and growth. I was born in Russia, but I spent most of my adult life in the US, and I worked for the first half of my career with the Fortune 500 companies, and subsequently I got introduced to startups when I was working with actually associations, trade associations, because trade associations are like conglomerates of all the different brands and within one industry. I've been mostly working with the tech startups, so ad tech, food tech, SaaS, obviously. Right now, my main client, if you will, or my main startup is space tech slash climate tech, Orbify. I've been with them full time for 2.5 years by now, which is a long time for me because I've jumped a lot of different brands so far. And I've also been trying myself out as a builder, a maker. I don't want to say founder because I haven't founded an actual company, but I've tried building products, and it's been a bumpy ride, honestly, mostly because I've been just attempting to do it alone most of the time.
1 year ago, you were shaping your idea of Aurora, the AI-powered coaching app to help founders, entrepreneurs find their why and support them mentally. So maybe you want to talk a bit more of where is Aurora today?
This was the one time in my life that I was so convinced about something that this was worth building, worth doing, etc., that I actually completely went out of my way and even, I don't want to say broke the rules of the Founders Club. I kind of, found an alternative approach because I was struggling with finding a technical co-founder. And obviously, no offense to Founders Club or any other accelerator. I think the concept there is really good, matching people, but I think the problem is that most of the technical co-founders go into those accelerators with already having their own idea. I think it's incredibly hard to find somebody outside of your own network who'll just be like, sure, let me build your stuff. Because it also takes conviction in the idea for somebody with a technical background who knows their time is worth a lot of money, just be like, yeah, sure, let me spend X amount of hours building something that you brought to the table. So, like I was saying, I went out of my way, hired people to build an MVP for me. And obviously, we're not talking about developing super sophisticated custom tech. It was still an MVP. We built it mostly with the no-code tools, namely Bubble. And obviously ChatGPT. Honestly, I think we did a really good job. And I was astonished by myself because, guys, by the way, I also have 2 small kids and they were even smaller last year. So you can imagine a mom who has a full-time job, another full-time job with the kids, also trying to make this happen. And the podcast, I'll start a podcast. And I kept telling myself, I feel like I'm not doing enough. And people were like, who are you comparing yourself to? Like, what? I remember one of the great guys that I was working with on the prototype was like, Olya, I work with people who can barely get through a full-time job.
Let me jump in here because I think I'd like to maybe explore this a bit more. Like, I think you're a great example of that it is possible to be a mom, to do a full-time job, to do a podcast that's published on a regular basis for the past year. What is your secret sauce for making it work?
I think there is no secret sauce, to be honest. I think it's called sacrifice. So you sacrifice a little bit here, you sacrifice a little bit there. But the problem is that I've sacrificed a lot of my personal space, a lot of my mental health, and it did end up in a huge burnout at the end of the year. I've also had a lot of fallouts with my husband that were a simple result of me just pushing myself all the time and thinking that every once in a while going out for a drink with a girlfriend was like good enough in terms of taking care of myself. No, it was clearly not. I think, and this is kind of like the mantras that I'm giving myself this year. It's like, okay, there is no easy hack. There is no easy solution. If you want to build something when you're a mom with 2 kids and a full-time job that you cannot quit, you either have to strike a deal with your partner to say, okay, every 2 or 3 nights, 2 or 3 nights a week, I need to devote them to whatever I'm building. So you gotta take a chance on me and you gotta take care of the kids, if you can, of course. Or this is out of the question because there is only 8 hours in my day. Morning and evening I have the kids. There is nothing I can do while they're around me. Actually, there is nothing I want to do while they're around me because this is what causes even more frustration. Weekends are out of the question because I would like to spend them with the kids. And I've stopped telling myself that I'm an unproductive person who cannot manage my time. Like, hell, I have a full-time job. There is no way I can squeeze a lot of things into the day. Sure, maybe, on a daily basis, I don't really need to spend 8 hours just doing, my regular job. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I would have 4 hours left. Yeah. Like, I still devote most of my daily working time to my regular job, which is totally fine. This is what brings me money. And I have really high work ethics. I'm not going to half-ass what I'm doing. So, unfortunately, there is no secret sauce. I think it's just really having this conversation with yourself, understanding what's more important to you. If you can take a leap of faith and just say, okay, I'm going to quit my full-time job and I'm going to take 3 months to do this and see if it works. If not, if you have kids, talk with your partner and see maybe your partner can take on some of the kids' time so you can have some evenings to yourself where you can work on that. Or just wait till the kids get bigger. I don't think there is a perfect answer.
I think the 2 things that I heard from you is, first of all, having a reality check with myself. Can I actually do that? The other thing, which probably for some might seem obvious, but I think for many not, it comes down to stakeholder communication. So my communication with my spouse or potential partners and laying down what are my terms of doing this and whether that's okay with them. And if there's alignment, then there's the support and we can go for it, right?
This reminds me that there was this part of the Founders Club where you're supposed to have this conversation with your co-founders. And I remember, sincerely, I was laughing it off first. I was like, whatever, we're all on the same page, right? We don't need to discuss this. And when I actually did have that conversation, because I've gone through 3 editions before I finally said, fuck it, I'm going to build it myself. I remember some people did not want to put it on the table openly, as in whenever, and I was the first one to say, hey guys, I have 2 kids. I cannot commit to having late night calls or something like this. All I can do is during the day. And some people were like, well, yeah, blah, and they were not okay with it. And I was like, well, if you're not okay with it, then this is the end of the conversation. I'm not gonna edit my capacity, my schedule, and my limitations in order to fit your needs. But I think this is a very important part. It's like if you get in bed with a co-founder for a project that both of you are passionate about, there needs to be a very thorough conversation. I feel like it's even more important than the conversation you have with your potential spouse, because then it's like there is a lot more involved.
Before we go forward to the topic of growth and strategy and then also Orbify, One last thing about the Founders Club. How would you summarize for the audience what were your main takeaways from the program or the time you spent in the program?
So, the first thing I want to say is I've definitely said it to you, but I don't think I've said it publicly. I think working with you in the program, and this is not me doing it because we're on your podcast and you know this sincere because I've already said it to you. For me, it was instrumental to work with you because you've showed me a different way of looking at this whole, building a product, right? So far, I have only approached from the perspective of tech. This was needs to be built, etc. And you showed to me that no, actually, user is at the center. And if you're not empathetic to their needs, if you don't even know what they're talking about, how they talk about it, if this is not matching their concrete needs, then what are you even building? I mean, that's probably not the way you put it because you're a very kind and nice person, and I'm probably on a different spectrum. Excuse me. But it was, for me, this was a breakthrough in a way that I started looking at products and how they're built. And it just gave me a whole new, fresh start. And I think this is probably what also stopped me in the tracks a little bit, that I've realized that maybe I was not even talking to the right people in all those user interviews. And the questions you asked me, which were not even like probing, right? They were not like some difficult, tricky questions. They were like very basic questions, but I didn't have the answer. And but it made me learn and understand a lot more about, product conception, compared more than I've learned in the past like 5 years. Where is Aurora today? So finally, after all my rambling, coming to answering the question, I'm coming back to the idea because I've gone through a standalone brainstorm with a life coach. And when I finally described to him what I want to build, he was like, isn't that what you told me you built last year? I was like, well, actually, yes. But with the expansion. So I've built it more as a kind of like a companion tool for entrepreneurs and maybe some high-level executives. But what I've realized is maybe that was not the right problem that I was solving. The problem that I would like to solve today, and it's still Aurora, but just I need to expand it, is that personal development space is so convoluted. Different products, different experts, different topics. It's impossible for one person to know where to start. So what happens is that a lot of people go through trial and error of trying this and that and that and that and that. And maybe 2 years down the road, they're finally onto something. I'm like, what if they didn't have to go through trial and error? What if they could just come to one place, get that freaking self-assessment, because that's where it starts. Everything starts with self-assessment, self-awareness, to understand what are the things that are holding you back the most, and then working from top to bottom. Maybe some people are already clear on their values, but they have so many limiting beliefs that they just don't even know how to move forward. But then there are others who have no idea about their values, etc. But they also probably don't have any limiting beliefs, and they're like, and they're working on the wrong thing. So, excuse me. It's kind of like, for example, fitness industry, it has standardizations and measurements, etc. They have the BMI, right? The body mass index. Self-development doesn't have any of that. I'm like, why not? Why the hell not? This is like the area that everybody is milking the most today. Yet there is no standardization, no concrete measurements, etc. What if you knew your personal development index, PDI, I guess, and you could just work from there? And so for me, Aurora is now becoming, I'm not the expert on the topic. I never was, and I never wanted to be, but I've gone through the whole journey of trying to reinvent myself. And I've realized that a lot of things pissed me off there. I'm like, this is not okay. Like, why am I doing this? It doesn't work for me.
What are some of those things?
The fact that there are a lot of experts that claim that this framework works. This is the only framework, blah, 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 blah. You know how many times I've tried forcing myself into all those frameworks? It just didn't work for me because I didn't realize that this was for a certain personality type, and this wasn't my personality type. I realized it like a year and a half later, actually end of last year when I started working with a life coach. He was like, no, Olya, that's just not how you work. And I was like, really? Because I'll give you a concrete example. Having the time blocks on your calendar to actually get things done. I thought this was the way for everybody. This is how like high performing individuals function.
Yeah.
Hell no, actually not. And it's the first seed was planted into my head by one of the guests on my podcast. She's I'm sure not everybody's in so, but she's a human design expert, which is yet another way of doing the personality assessment, etc. It's all still revolves around the same thing. And she was like, "What?" I was asking her about that. She was like, "No, I'm manifesting generator." I think that was the type. And she was like, "If I try to put blocks on my calendar, it will drive me crazy and I will do nothing." I was like, that's exactly how I feel. She was like, yeah, you're probably the same type. Like, this is not how you work. You just need to work on spontaneous things. It's just like whatever comes to your mind. I'm like, how am I ever gonna get anything done? That's not what they say. And she's like, try it. And I've tried it, like magic is happening. And then I talked about it to my coach and he was like, yeah, he was like, yeah, I'm not into, the human design because it's more like astrology, etc. He's like, but let's do a personality test. So we did a personality test and he was like, yeah, you're not supposed to be functioning in time blocks. I mean, it's a very concrete example. He's like, you're supposed to be functioning more so having a general idea of what's going to happen in your day and just like taking it one thing at a time.
I would like to bring up another topic. You currently work as a Chief Growth Officer at Orbify, and that's a platform that uses AI to analyze satellite imagery for measuring environmental impact and monitoring climate projects. So did I get that right?
Yeah. So we basically, this is the core of our business. That's how we started, by understanding there is a gap in the market of, I guess, underutilization of satellite data. That was the original pitch that I've heard from the founder when I joined summer 2022. So it's going to be 3 years soon. And again, full disclosure would be that we were not approaching it from the right perspective. So we're kind of looking at, look, this thing is not utilized. Let's make use of it. But then it was not solving a concrete problem. It took us almost a year to finally find a concrete problem to solve with this. And namely, it's all of those, I guess, nature conservation and restoration projects. Most of them generate carbon credits that are then sold to companies that need them in order to offset their emissions, etc. And then the other part of it was legislation that came out end of 2023 called EUDR, European Union Anti-Deforestation Regulation, that stipulates that companies importing or exporting goods from the European Union, namely 6 different commodities, coffee, palm oil, etc., they need to prove that they did not cut down any forest in order to produce those commodities or products derived from them. So these were our original use cases, and we still have them. However, we have realized that just the satellite imagery is not a good enough selling proposition, if that makes sense. So it's only solving part of the problem, namely even UDR. So UDR goes way beyond just analyzing the producer's plot with the satellite imagery. There is also traceability, compliance with local laws and regulations, etc. So we have realized that if we want to continue surviving, we need to go outside of satellite imagery and just build a more holistic product. So that's where we're at.
What are some of the lessons growing the company over the past 2, almost 3 years?
Skipping the user interviews. When I joined the company, the product was completely different, and we realized that like a few months into it, because we started doing the user interviews with the past intended users, and people were like, no, this doesn't make any sense. That's not what we need. Like, we already have the soft for that. And we realized that we were talking to the wrong people. Like, as in those were like the intermediaries. So basically, like people who analyze satellite data, we thought that we were building product for them. They were like, no, we have Esri and all of those like Mastodon tools. But then the end user actually wanted our stuff. So all those companies that develop the nature-based solutions, so the conservation projects, and we had to pivot to make it accessible to the final users. And we thought we knew what we were doing because but again, we didn't do enough of the user interviews. So there was a lot of trial and error, shipping of features and functionalities that didn't make sense. So not taking enough time to do the user behavior analytics. We did have mixed panel the entire time. We were just not really looking into it because there was no time, no human capacity. I think it would have given us some answers and we would have just avoided wasting time on building features and templates that didn't make sense.
Okay, I hear like that one big takeaway is that the user is important, the user problems, the user perspective, the user needs, that's all there. So maybe then from there expanding a bit, you also in your introduction mentioned that you have worked across climate tech, ed tech, fintech, and health tech. What challenges regarding growth you have observed in the teams or startups you have worked with as well?
Let me talk about the experience that I had right before Orbify. It was a fintech based here in the south of France. That was one of the most detrimental experiences for my mental health. I've been open about this for a while, so this is not something that I talk about for the first time so that you don't get shocked. It was, I think, an amazing idea that those people and I say people because I want to be nice, had. None of them had any background or experience building things, assembling teams, etc. They were all just, a boys' club that had their daddy's money, etc. So they were like, okay, let's build this. I think the idea was freaking amazing. They were trying to put together neobanking, crypto investment, traditional investment all in one app, basically saying, hey, you can pay with, for example, the interest that your crypto pays you with just this card and you don't need to cash out. So it's like, the idea was great. And they've raised a lot of money in the ICO. ICO is initial coin offering where you basically say that you're going to launch a coin, etc. So 30 million, imagine that, 30 million. They've burned through almost all of it with a span of 1 year. 1 freaking year. Yeah. They've hired over 100 people, then they lost almost all of them. Most people quit themselves because of just how horrible the company culture was, how people were treated. People were not treated like people. I was the only female manager on the management team out of over 10 people. I was there definitely as an accessory. Every time I would have something to say, so I was the head of marketing. They'd be like, great idea, Olya, but we're just going to do whatever we want anyways. So that was how I was treated the entire time. And it definitely took my imposter syndrome out of proportion. I think we all have it to a certain extent, but that just definitely killed me. It took me a while to get my confidence back up, and actually working with the founders at Orbify helped a lot because they're all kind, empathetic people, just real people, no problem, no egos, no nothing. And so the problem there was, if you want to go work for a startup, if there are people listening who are just, considering a change, go look them up, the founders, see how they present themselves. If there is an ego problem, please don't go work for an egomaniac. Those people don't change. All that matters for all those people is them, nothing else. They'll treat you like meat, honestly, cannon meat, nothing else, no matter what your level of seniority is. And if you're joining a startup at a very early stage, that seems like a great idea. Ask them for a concrete execution plan. Ask them for a roadmap. Ask them how they're going to get to the users, etc. If there is no clarity on that, don't join that startup, because chances are you're going to burn through money and still end up with nothing.
One last topic I want to touch upon before I let you go is your podcast, The Business Savages. So that's something you launched 1 year ago. where you interview entrepreneurs and people who work with them. You also mentioned that there are a lot of things you're learning from your guests, from the human design expert on calendar block things. Looking ahead, if you could interview any entrepreneur or any leader, past or present, who would that be and why, in short?
Wow, that's a really good question. You know who that would be? That would be Lewis Howes. He's the host of the School of Greatness. He's been my role model because this is something that I've learned at the beginning of last year, as in you need to find somebody who you can emulate, as in fake it till you make it, because it's easier when you have something to follow instead of just like exactly. So, and I've listened to a lot of his interviews, and it has helped me understand that you can just get started. It's like it's not going to cost you anything, and you can be ballsy. You can like send messages to people that you don't know, which I've had a big problem with before. And eventually, so I started the podcast with interviewing people that I knew, obviously, including you, Carlos. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'm running out of my network. So, and I just started messaging people who seemed interesting on LinkedIn and Instagram. And this was the lineup that I had afterwards. At first I was a little bit desperate, just basically trying to get anybody who would agree, of course. But then I started being intentional, and it works. People are actually like honored and excited to come onto the podcast, even though I mean, I don't have a huge following. It's like a healthy following, and I've managed to be consistent for a year. I don't know how, not a year. I started in March. So March was the date when I got out of the Founders Club, and I decided I was not going to launch the product, but I needed to work on my credibility, and the podcast was going to be that credibility thing. And so I would love to interview him because I would like to ask him questions on like, did that really happen, or was it just for the podcast? No, seriously, because he's the one who taught me that it's okay to be open and sincere about your own experiences, because A, it actually helps you heal whatever you need to heal, and B, it will definitely help other people because it makes them feel seen and heard, as in like, whoa, this person is also dealing with that, so it's like it's okay for me to be going through this. Even just this week, I've posted some quite sincere content on LinkedIn, just nothing extraordinary. Like, it's not like, I don't know, I killed someone, I posted about it on LinkedIn. But I've received a ton of messages from people that I didn't expect to, just from some professional engagement. They're not my friends or my immediate network. They were like, thanks for posting this. I'm also going through rough times. It just really helped me. And I was like, oh. And that's this was something that I've always wanted to see. I don't know if I shared it with you last year, but when I was asked, so what's the end goal? I'm like, I can clearly see that what would make my day if I receive a message saying, thanks, Olya, this really helped. And so now that I'm receiving this message just from posting content, I'm like, this is it. I like how it feels. I like helping people. And I want Aurora, that I'm definitely going to do this year, do the same thing. I want people to message me and be like, holy shit, thanks, Olya. This really made a difference for me. I'm now on my way to do X, Y, and Z. Like, for me, this is the end game.
Okay, so then in that case, before we wrap it up, as you mentioned, Aurora is coming this year. So when can we expect Aurora to be on the App Store this year?
Ooh, you know what? I have also promised myself for this year that I'm not setting any hard timelines for myself, because that's just not how it works for me. However, I can tell you my immediate next step is that I would like to get back to the research. But because now I have the whole concept, the whole everything figured out, and I just want to ask more concrete questions of people. And now that I have no problem sending messages to people that I don't know, this is going to be a lot easier, because I want to be like, hey guys, is this the problem? Because you seem to be focused on personal development. Would this be a problem for you to solve? Like, would this help? Would that help? And I have no problem interviewing people anymore. So I'm like a brand new person, almost restarting the same thing, but at this point, I'm so confident that I can make it work.
It's been a great pleasure having you here. Thank you very much for finding the time in your busy schedule.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's been therapeutical. Let's put it this way.
That wraps up today's episode with Olya Grovel. Let's reflect on 3 key takeaways. Firstly, user-centricity. Olya's shift from a tech-focused mindset to a user-centered approach has been crucial in her development of the Aurora app. Secondly, balancing entrepreneurship and motherhood. Olya's story highlights the power of honest communication, setting realistic expectations, and seeking support while juggling a startup and raising 2 children. And finally, vulnerability and authenticity. Olya fosters a culture of openness and connection, whether through her podcast or the platform she's building with Aurora. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow Olya and check out her work with Business Savages. Till next time.